Hello, and welcome to The Source Within with Chloe Pedalino, where I share the source within me with hopes it sparks the source within thee. Hello, and welcome to The Source Within with Chloe Pedalino. That is me. We are going to be talking today about the source, also known as AKA God, or what we generally refer to as God, and the story of creation. And FYI, this might be very different than what you have heard before about both God and the story of creation. It's kind of difficult to talk about one without the other. That is why I'm starting out with a podcast that is introducing both of these topics to discuss. So I am hopeful that people will have an open mind as they hear what this information is, and as we move forward. So let's start with a moment of bringing ourselves to this place and space, wherever you are listening to this, whether it's in your car, driving, or out grocery shopping, wherever it might be. Maybe take a quick deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we'll go within and set an intention, including I remain open to the information that I will hear today. Please help me to understand the information that I need to hear and the messages that need to come to me at this time. I am grateful for myself for being here today and listening to this podcast that may help me with my own self-development and growth. I am grateful to the creatrix and source themselves, and to those who came before us, and to those who come after us. Thank you so much. So, as we step into this, again, with an open mind and the setting and the understanding that the real story about God and creation is not one that we have generally heard before. And that's really the bottom line. The only really way to understand some of this information is a bit letting go of the existing stories and narratives that we have been told, to replace it then with a story that is actually the truth and much more in line with what's going on in the universe. All right, so why don't we just get right into the content? At the beginning of the beginning, and it's impossible for us to know when this occurred, because at the beginning, there was no time and there was no space. An important takeaway from understanding this creation story is understanding that if the creatrix, if the source is eternal, limitless, unending, not contingent on time, not time limited, then and we are made also in the likeness of the creatrix, the source, God, then that too means that we are also eternal and not ending. Now, sure, we die on the earthly plane. We pass away on the earthly plane, which is also thought of a rebirth on the spiritual plane. But to say basically that our spirit is never ending and is eternal, and that aspect of us is eternal, just as God is. And we'll continue to talk about what that actually means and how that relates to, okay, we don't just have one earthly life. In fact, we have many of them, many of them. So we will talk more about that and what that looks like and how that plays out in our existences at different points throughout this podcast. Now, numbers are really important to understanding spirituality and understanding our creation. Studying numbers is called numerology. And so as we learn the story of creation, listen closely to the numbers and to their meanings. And over time and throughout this podcast, certainly we will be talking a lot about numbers and what their underlying meanings are and what we can extract and understand from numbers. It all started with the one. Now, the number one is represented by or known as the male principle. We can think of it as the yang. It is the purpose. It is the thought. It is the masculine component here. And the one is the thought itself. So the initial, what is called I am, the one, had to have the first idea, mission, desire. Desire as a one is associated with ones, it's associated with beginnings. So the one had to have the thought, the desire, and then speak of what can I become? Who and what can I become? And it is that point when the I am, the God, the Logos, the one asked, what can I become? That in doing so, in having that thought and then speaking that thought, the word then, it created this vibration that then created essentially the rest of the universe. So you have the one started in and of itself. And the one had the thought of what could I become, and then spoke the word. Now the word, and this is quoted, this is also in the Bible by John. It says, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. And word means this intelligent vibration. And so this intelligent vibration going out from God speaking with also the intention of wanting to know itself. God had to, whatever this supreme cosmic intelligence is, had the desire to know itself at one point in time. And when it did so, it then separated through that vibration of thought and speech, the word, that cosmic vibration went out there and created then this two. Now we can think about it as proton being positive associated with masculine, male at a sense of purpose, and then female, the electron considered as the mission, the womb, the feminine, and also the speech itself, because needed both parts were then needed in order to create this, what can be called like the vibratory nature of creation. Essentially what happens is when the first and the second were created, they create this energy that starts, you have basically one circle here and one circle there. And when the first circle is separated out by having this thought and speak and speaking its intention, its desire, by doing that, it wanted to see itself from multiple perspectives. So it's like if we had a body double outside of ourselves, we could see ourselves from all angles, right? So once it was separated from the one to the two, then the energy between the one and two started making the proton and the electron dance around each other, start circling and spinning around each other. And when one moves, the other one has to move. So that means everything is constantly in motion. And by this constant motion, this is what creates a network of energy. And this is from a book, The Yoga of Jesus. I'll put it in the show notes. And it says, quote, at the ultra microscopic level, the universe will be akin to a string symphony vibrating matter into an existence. That is saying is we have the one, we have the two. Once they get together, they are constantly in motion. And what happens is this constant motion is essentially those two then become a three. Once it becomes a three, then it just keeps on going. Then the concentric circles are just keep made over and over and over and over and over again. And more and more and more. So both are needed though. Both are needed to actually create. So there could be just the thought and not the word necessarily. But that's not going to lead to creation. Both aspects, both of the feminine and the masculine aspects are needed energetically as well in order to create. You can think about it as like a Venn diagram. And if people know what that is, basically it's two circles and they're joined, they're connected by overlapping parts in the middle. So there's there's center part basically where they're overlapping. If you Google it, you'll see it's Venn diagram. It's these two circles overlapping. The part in the middle of those two circles now is the seed, okay? So again, you have a proton. We have the positive, which could be conceptualized a bit as like a proton. Also, which is a purpose. It is the thought. It is also the masculine. Then you have the other circle, sphere shape, and that is a negative, and that is the mission, the womb, the way that the thought actually becomes something. And so you have now these two ones, and they overlap, and in the middle is the seed. And while we can think about this is then we basically have these we can think about it as two parent figures, a masculine and a feminine, and the combination of the two creates the seed. It creates another separate being from the two coming together. Literally all creation, every being, all existence in all time and space has been created and comes from that initial positive and negative energy from the very first start of everything, that the first time that those two split apart and became three, a trinity. So once that third was created, that triggered the universe. The gods thought, and then the will of the universe to want to like know itself, to want to see what it could experience, what it could develop, what it could create, and wanted to understand itself through evolution. To quote the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ again, and spirit breathed, and that which was not manifest became the fire and thought of heaven, the Father God, the Mother God. So what this is saying is that all creation was made from these two aspects, this feminine and this masculine aspect. That is what created everything since that time. And so once we got to the three, everything just keeps on going. At that point in time, everything is just expanding, and another circle's turning another circle, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just keeps going. The energies keep on going into different spheres, into different shapes. And so the first souls and what they were creating by each of these were our souls through spirit, which is God. So spirit creates these souls. We all have spirit though, because we're all created from God, and these circles getting larger and larger and larger, but we're not quite there yet. So the first souls that were ever in existence were referred to as the Elohim, Elohim. To quote the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, the one became the two became the three evolved the seven, which filled the universe with manifests. And when the trine God breathed forth, lo, seven spirits stood before the throne. These were the Elohim, creative spirits of the universe. Now, before I get back to more of the science-y talk about creation, essentially, to go back a second, they're talking about this God had breath. So God had the thought, and then he spoke. And then by having the one become the two, then it became the three. And the three, from the beginning, the first beings that were the largest and greatest beings were these Elohim. Then what the Elohim then created were actually archangels, and the archangels created the angels, and then it keeps going down from there. There is, evidence of the notion of these godlike, enormous beings called the Elohim. So they were the largest creations, the largest beings that were very initially created in the universe. And again, they're essentially these enormous flowers of life, and you can Google that as well. Flower of life is these overlapping circles, and they just keep getting larger and larger. And they're all connected in some way. And so they were these big body like circles and like this flower shape, and they just kept dividing itself into different cells, like an egg in the womb of a mother, just dividing and dividing. And at first, everything also in existence was only energy, which we in the 3D world really struggle to wrap our minds around, this notion that all of existence is energy. And it's really only here on Earth or in the other planets in the third dimension that we are physical. But alas, I won't get into that to complicate things too much right now. But at the beginning, everything was energy, it was spirit. It did not have form initially. Well, it was form. It was only an energetic. It was only energetic. It wasn't physical. Then they started going into shapes, which were the spherical shapes, and think about cells again. And the initial things that were created out of that, well, so the largest ones were the Elohim. So keep in mind, though, at this point, all of this energy is just creating more and more, expanding upon itself. This energy is just going out from this one, all just from that beginning consciousness. And the energy kept expanding out and out and out. It would expand out and contract in, expand out and contract in over and over and over again. And it created such a pressure and a force. Basically, God was like reflecting back all the possibilities of all of the universe that could possibly become, and it did out and in and out and in, and by doing so, also it was reflecting back into the shadows. So there's darkness and lightness. So with this, essentially, dark creates a mirror and everything is reflected back in that mirror through the darkness. And so the energy going out and coming in would be going in different areas of these light. And so the waves made by the vibrations of this energy going in and out, the pressure became so extreme that basically everything things exploded at one point in time. This one point in time was 6,000 million years ago. 6,000 million years ago. And this is what we're referred to as the Big Bang. All of these circles again, all this creation starting from the one thought that the Logos had, split out and multiplied itself so many times, and it was expanding and contracting, expanding, contracting. At one point it became too much and it split out. And from that was when the moment when matter, when what we know as the physical world around us today, physical matter. So that is how we came into a physical existence. Again, before that, everything was energetic. Nothing was physical. Nothing was in the material. There was no material world at that time. So we had God, we had the thought, then became the purpose, became the mission, that then the thought became the purpose, became the mission, spread out. The creation expanded to more and more spheres and more shapes over time. The Elohim were the initial largest creations and energy forces that exist in the universe. And from those, then, and we have the Big Bang, from those, then, there started to be material and physical creation. And so the initial forms of any existence of soul and of souls were these sphere shapes and were spiral shapes. And so the planets, the stars, when we look at like those are all spheres. Those are indicative of being some of the earliest things that were created ever. So spheres, round shapes like that were representative of the most early creations. And again, the Elohim were those initial creators, and they created those. The Elohim were also responsible for creating the four elements: earth, water, fire, gas, air. And it was from creating those four elements that the Elohim then were responsible for creating different races, different species, and then, different realities within our third dimension. So that's essentially the story of creation. Now, it doesn't bring us to modern day yet, which I'll cover in other episodes, but that's really the initial story of creation. And so to really back up and to really understand this, we'll go back to this notion that this notion about the initial consciousness having thought. What this also means is that everything is in existence of the all or God's mind's eye. We'll discuss this a little bit more. This is also known the principle of mentalism, principle of unity. We're talking about universal principles. And when they're talk it's been said that we're all connected, everything is connected, etc. Well, it's true. The reason we're all connected, it's not necessarily like a hunky-dory, like, oh yeah, ring around the rosy, link hands, hold hands kind of thing. We're all together in this, which is lovely. Though that's not really what it's referring to. What it's referring to of this unity and this idea that we're all connected is, one, that we all are connected because we all only exist in the eye, the mind's eye, the mind of God, of the source. Had the source not had that thought, had there not been a thought of what I could become, we would not be in existence. We are a hologram. We are like a reflection. We're a hologram of a reality that God created. And we're basically a projection of God's consciousness. Everything exists only because God thought at one point in time, what could I become? Everyone, all of us, the whole planet, the universe, everything. The stars, the planets, our galaxy, other galaxies. We only exist really in this creatrix being's, the source's mind. Now, what's also important with that to reckon with, that's a big one to even sit with. To even sit with the fact that we are holograms, it's a very weird thing because you look at your hands and we seem like we're really real. It seems like what do you mean I'm a hologram? I think about like a hologram being fake. But that's just because our current existence is in a three-dimensional world, which attunes us to only thinking that what we can see or what we can feel physically is real, when in fact that is very, very far from the truth. In fact, it's very far from the truth. We in the 3D only live if we abide by this notion that only what we see is what is real. Then we're missing. There's a plethora of existence out there that we are not able to see with our eyes. We are only a fraction of the existence of beings and souls that are in the universe. And in fact, our soul and our spirit are not physical. How we are on Earth is essentially our everything is made of matter. Certainly, we are not vibrating at the frequencies as those more enlightened beings are. They're functioning at a higher frequency wave. We on Earth are focusing on a lower frequency wave. So, getting back on track here, we are merely a projection, a hologram projection, and we all exist in the mind of the creator. That's one thing. The other piece is that God is masculine and feminine, the positive and the negative. And I don't mean this like in positive and good and negative and bad, because that's where we get tripped up in our duality way of thinking. So there's no value assigned to it. It is simply that there is a positive aspect. If we want to think about it in science terms, it's probably the easiest way we can conceptualize this notion of positive and negative not having a value attributed to it, meaning one's not associated with being good and one's not associated with being bad. But without the thought and then the subsequent mission or reception of that thought by the negative, there wouldn't be a birth, there wouldn't be a creation of anything. So the one and the two are necessary in order to create the three. And so in that and of itself, there's a requirement of having masculine and feminine. So God themselves is both masculine and feminine. They could not have created existence without the both masculine and feminine. Also, we could think about it like alpha and omega, right? That's another way to think about it. So both were needed. Now, so we understand now that God is made of both masculine and feminine. We also understand that we are literally made from God, the source, all. We are made from, in fact, we only exist because of the all. But then on top of that, we are made from the all. Remember, the Elohim, the initial beings, our cells, they split, these enormous beings that we can't really even fathom the size of them. They split off into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. So we can think about us, we are like a cell We are like the size of a tiny, tiny cell. You know how we have billions of cells within us? Well, we are just one little cell of one of those enormous Elohim beings that has billions and billions of cells. We, each one of us, are one cell from that Elohim. The Elohim came from the initial logos thought, and the Sophia. Sophia is really the other name for the cosmic mother. So we have the logos, the cosmic itself, and then we have Sophia, the cosmic mother. Another way to think about it. We have the alpha, and then we have the omega, which would be the Sophia, also known as the sky or the sun, could be the masculine aspect of God. Vision is God, and the feminine, Gaia, the earth, being the feminine associated aspect of God. Both needed, right? If we have seeds, let's say we have a tree on earth, there's a seed that goes into the ground. We could say that the rains come down and feed and nurture the seed, and the soil, the womb, is where the plant grows from. So we could see the earth as a mother, the womb, and we can see the other aspect as having the initial thought, initial putting the seed in the ground, and then watering a long time. But again, both are needed. Now, so we have both masculine and feminine with God. We now understand that really all existence is hologram. And we just are very dense matter, but we'll get into more of that later. Now, the other thing to understand is that we are literally made directly from God. So, in that realm, it also supports the notion that we all, whether we're male or female here on earth, have aspects of both. Both genders exist in all of us. You have feminine parts, we have masculine parts. They both exist with all of us. And just know that in all of existence, whether it be plants, whether it be animals, what have you, all existence has both masculine and feminine parts. Bottom line, but has both aspects. The other thing that it means that we're made of God, and one of the biggest ones, and one of the most incorrectly framed aspects about this and the notion of creation and where we come from and all of that, is that we humans have the source, we're made of the source, and we therefore inside of us have the capabilities that God has. In many ways. Not all of them, not to the extent perhaps that all of them, and maybe not the extent necessarily in the 3D as God. But we were made, we have the capabilities and abilities that source has. And one of those huge ones is the ability to create. So we must understand that we have this divine abilities as creatrixes in our own lives, and even more than that, because we are made from the source, and we also exist within the universe that the source created. So the laws that apply, especially the universal principles, those apply to everyone, no matter what frequency you're living on, or what dimension, or how you feel about them. It doesn't really matter. Every being in existence is governed by certain laws and principles, which we will get into. And one of those laws and principles is this notion of a law of attraction. And this speaks to the power of our thoughts, just as God created all the existence that we see today, including ourselves, from their thought of wanting to understand who they were, or what it could become. We too can create the lives that we want if we learn how to use our thoughts in an effective way. And we learn the other principles of the universe, we learn the other laws, and we understand the true history and the truth of where we came from. We too have the capability of creating what we want. Once we realize that our voice carries power through its vibration, that what we put out there, that our thoughts carry a vibration that can then create waves, and that then in return flow back to us. What we put out there then comes back. Then you start realizing that you really are able to create your own life. And you get in the role of it, you get in the vibe of it, you get in the flow with it, and you start really seeing reflected back to you the life that you really envision for yourself. Our divine inheritance. What I mean by that is, let's say if we think of God, both the mother and the female and male aspects of it, like we think about like a mom and a dad. We can think of our divine parents. And there's two aspects, there's a mom and a dad there. Not always the case. Not always the case. Sometimes there are two moms, sometimes there are two dads, but for the purposes of this, we are given our divine inheritance includes, quote, godlike powers of consciousness. That's from the Mary Magdalene manuscripts. I love that phrase, godlike powers of consciousness. And what's happened is that we kind of just what is predominantly happening is we don't realize we haven't been told, or we don't know basically the power that we hold, nor have we been necessarily told that we have godlike consciousness or that it's okay to even speak like that. And so we've kind of been bumbling around using our thoughts and our words haphazardly when when you start to really understand these concepts more, you realize, holy crap, I need to examine my thoughts. I need to examine how I'm speaking, because now I realize that my thoughts and words and actions, I am creating basically what I am seeing around myself. So that is much of what we will learn in the following episodes. So what are the takeaways again? Takeaways again are, one, everybody has masculine and feminine within them. God is both masculine and feminine. It is our sovereign right. It is our inheritance. God wants us to know and realize that we do have these God-given abilities. They want us to know about how the principles of the universe function, and wants us to be able to create the existence and the lives that we want to create. And mind you, God created us to understand what themselves could be. By creating me, by creating you, God is fulfilling, it's living out the existence that it wanted to have. We'll get into this later, but it is through the other person, it's through the other, it is also through relationships that we experience and we learn ourselves more. We learn more about ourselves. So God, again, created us, created existence, created all these things so that it could live out its full experience. It is doing that through us. It's doing that through birthing the Elohim, who then birthed the plants, who then birthed the fire, water, air, and earth, that then created all the species and the beings on earth. God is fulfilling what it wanted to do when it first had that thought of what I could become. You are part of that. You are part of what God could become. And God wants you to access your abilities and your capabilities. Absolutely. God is not punishing. God wants well for everyone and everything. The essential and well-being, ascension and well-being of one relates to the ascension and well-being of all. Now, what God also wants you to know, which is, we already said this, but I'm going to say it again, is that we are created of God. That means we have God within us. That means we have spirit within us, because in order for that to happen, that to have happened, for the Big Bang, all of this to occur, each one of us has spirit. We all have those cells that were created from the Elohim, from God. That's all inside all of us. And you can connect. In fact, God wants you to connect with yourself and to know that you have God within yourself. So if you're wanting to know God more, part of that journey is by going within to know yourself better and to get to know your God self better. So we also often think of like, oh, I need to go outside. It's an external thing. Like I need to go outside, or I need to go to church, or I need to talk to this person will connect me to God, or we blame the external circumstances for why our life is the way it is right now. Oh, we blame this person, or we blame the time of year, or we blame whatever it can be, rather than realizing and recognizing that no, it's actually within us. We are the creators of our external environment. And it is by going within, by connecting to our source, by connecting to the source that is within us, and tapping into our creatrix abilities, that is how we realize our full potential. And in doing so, essentially, how God is realizing their initial desire to know themselves or to know what they could become. I certainly hope this helps you along your journey. Again, lots of new information and a lot to wrap your head around and a lot to digest. And so take your time with that. It certainly took me a while and some time to realize that, oh my goodness, everything around us is a hologram. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And there's this one creatrix, one God out there, oh my gosh, who had this thought, created this most magnificent, expansive, never ending existence. And then further chewing on the fact that those similar abilities are then within me. That was very powerful when I recognized that. And not only and powerful and also a lot to internalize. This idea that we create with everything going on around us, like that is a big thing to swallow. That's a big pill to swallow. And this is not the only discussion that we'll have about that aspect. That's certainly something that I will talk about again because it is a really huge paradigm shift to realize the extent to which we create our own realities. And so that will be revisited. This is just a little spark there to start thinking in that way, but that is just kind of a glimpse of where we are. So, thanks so much for listening, everybody. I look forward to being back and seeing you next week. And as always, I share the source within me, hoping that it sparks the source within thee. Have a good day, y'all.